everyone, and welcome to my channel. It's Jen here, and I am going to draw this beautiful owl, and I'm going to paint him with watercolour. So I'm going to start by showing you how I do the drawing. So I start basically with a circle for his head, like that, and then his body is 1, 2, 3 times the length of his head. So I go 1, 2, 3 times the length of his head, and I pop it there, the little dot there, so I have a marker of where he is, where his body ends. And now from that, I'm going to go follow the lines of the drawing. So I'm constantly looking at the angles, the lines, and the direction, the way the bird sits. And I'm sort of drawing an oval coming off that circle, an unfinished oval shape. And then I'll take it almost to the end, like that. And then the bottom that goes down to where the longest part of his body is his tail. So I will just draw that shape of his tail in. And I can change the shapes as I see fit, as I need to. He's got quite long legs. So this is just the base to get the sketch onto the paper. Now his legs are the same length. So the depth of his head is the length of his legs. So, and they're quite sort of thin legs, thin-ish legs. And he's got beautiful claws. So I'll draw his little claws. So his claws are about half the length, or his toes are about half the length of his leg. So you can see I use my fingers a lot to get measurements. It's really helpful. I'm doing his toes on slightly different angles. His toes are strange, actually. I'm going to do this one sort of more facing us. And I'll draw the claw on that one. And there's another claw coming out this way. So he's got sort of 3 toes that I can see there. Then the other leg is sort of coming around behind here. But I can't really see any of the detail on that. And he's sitting on a tree stump. So I'm going to draw in that tree stump. Like that. And that's not going to be the focus of the picture. It's just I just want it to be just showing that it's supporting the owl. Right, now we can start to get into detail. So I'm going to start with the shape of his eyes. So looking at the picture again, I'm going to draw his brows first and the shape around his eyes. And here's where I start to adjust the shape. You can't see that ear, but you can see all feathers where the ears are. They protect the ears. I think they help to focus the direction of the sounds. And then he's got a roundish shape coming around the side markings of these feathers around his eyes. So I draw those in just roughly. And in the middle is his beak. And his beak comes to the bottom of these eye markings, eye feathers. So I just draw those in to about the same length as the bottom of these eye feathers, like that. Then he's got a little beard. It's not a beard, but it's different coloured feathers that look like a beard that come down and around there. So I've just marked those in very lightly. Now for his eyes. So his eyes are parallel, but at the middle of his iris is the top of his beak on both sides. And then he's got, oh sorry, that's his pupil. Then his iris is much larger and comes around like that. Try and keep them the same size. You know, bound to get them a little bit different because freehand drawing and all. But it helps to show you how to get the perspective and all of that stuff. So now I'm actually going to change the line here because you can see his back juts out a bit from that first initial circle. He's got, I'm just going to draw in the markings, or where I'm going to put, well, in this case, I'm going to leave the white of the paper as the white of the bird. He's got some feathers that come around here, same on both sides. So I can draw in those feathers like that. So I draw the wing in and it goes to the back. And I'm going to keep this watercolour as simple as possible. So it'll be 3 or 4 layers of just washes. And I'm just now adding the bottom feathers on. I can see the lines of a few of these going down there like that. And then his tail, I can see he's got feathers on the top, and then underneath he's got very thick kind of stripy textured feathers. So I'll just roughly add in the lines. And I can see his other wing on the other side. I think it's his wing. The underside of his wing is coming. Actually, I might not do that. I might just leave that. I'm just going to do rough patterns of his markings. And I've got to take that feather up a little bit. All right. Rough, do the lines in. But I don't even particularly need to do that. Okay. I'm going to erase the lines that I don't want. So I'm going to get my kneadable eraser, which I love, and I'm going to erase any lines that look a bit messy that I don't really want. The line that joins his body together, I can leave the line that joins his head mostly, because that will be actually part of his featherage. Now I can just redraw in little marks where I want them. Right, so that's the base drawing pretty much done. I've pre-wet my watercolours so that they'll flow better on the paper. So I'm going to start with the base colour, which is going to be transparent sienna. So I'm going to get my brush, get sort of a medium-sized brush, I think. Get my water ready, which is right here. Wet my brush and get my transparent sienna onto my palette up here. And I'm going to start with a wash, a very diluted wash of transparent sienna right across this owl, except for the eyes, because the eyes are yellow and orange. So I'm just going to go around the eyes and just fill in anywhere except obviously the bits that are white. I will leave those the white of the paper. So come around the outside of this eye, and then I'll build up in layers going from light to dark. Now you can see he's lighter under his beak, but I'm just going to go around that. I've got to leave that area because that's a white area on his neck. And that now pretty much I can go around his wing and fill in the rest of his body. And this is a very soft watercolour brush. It's a Raphael brush that I got the other day. It's really nice for these kind of larger washes. So I'll take that, leave the chest markings there, and while this is going to be a lot of wet on wet work, so I'm not going to let him dry. I'm just going to keep adding colours on top. So, but this is the base layer. So I'll get his legs coloured in. Take it round his toes. I can adjust that tone later. So take that round there like that. Okay, so that's the first layer in. So I'm going to grab my second brush now, and I'm going to go onto a size 6 silver black velvet, and I'm going to go in with a bit of burnt umber now. Bit of burnt umber. It's just a darker brown. And while that's still damp, I'm going to go over the top of the transparent sienna and just add the little browner markings. And you can see I'm leaving gaps between the feathers, or to suggest feathers. Okay, so I'm going to come around this eye, take it down onto that ear feather plumage, come back around the darker areas, the edge of his eye feathers, like that. And I'm just going to, while that's still damp, I'm just going to drop in these feathery patterns. Get some more water on my brush, a little bit more water on my brush, not too much. And I'm going to take that around, leaving little gaps for the underneath lighter feathers. And I'm going to continue that in the shape of the bird, following around, always following the direction. And then continue these lines to the bottom get a bit more burnt umber onto my palette there. And I'm also going to take these lines onto the bottom tail feathers. Not going to do it exactly the same as the photo. The photo is just a reference. So, and these feathers on top are much darker. So I'll put a wash of burnt umber there. I'll add some more over the top in a minute. Now, I'm going to have to re-wet the wing because that's dry. So I'm going to get a clean brush, rinse it off, and just re-wet that wing so that when I put the paint in, it will drop in and spread around nicely. So I'm going to put that. Now I'm going to put my burnt umber onto there. And I'm going to follow these lines down here of the feathers. You hear my little dog playing with his ball in the background. I apologise. He's throwing his ball around the room, having a play. Okay. So take that around, just following the direction of the feathers on his wings. As you can see, he's got much darker feathers. So now, while that's still damp on his back, I'm going to go in and add that grey that I can see in these darker areas. He's much darker just there. And I'll add some grey following the lines of the feathers I did before. And because that's damp, it will disperse onto the paper really nicely. So just suggesting the feathers like that. Not doing too much detail. He's much darker just there. And he's now got that really dark around the outer part of his eye. And I'm going to do little soft touches to make that line softer of those feathers. And he's also got a darker line at the top of that ear plumage. Again, around this other eye, softly mark those darker feathers. This darker spot down here. He's got that equally on that side. He's got a dark spot there. Right, I'm going to have to re-wet this lower part of the bird. So I'm going to dip my brush back into the clean water, rinse it off. And I'm going to take, whoops, re-wet that watercolour. And while that's damp, I'm going to drop the darker brown in on his tongue. Or the grey, sorry. So burnt umber, cobalt blue. To make that grey, get a bit more cobalt blue on there. There we go. That's better grey. And you see I've got a bit of a puddle at the bottom there. So I'm going to get a clean brush and just absorb that puddle up. So now I'm popping this grey onto the belly, like that. Right, so I continue down. I could go over that bit that I've marked there. Get these lines down here a little bit closer together. You can see the paper's dried, so the lines are much stronger. So add those on there. Clean my brush. Right, so you can see I've just cleaned my brush. I'll drag that down just to soften that a little bit. And I'll add some darker lines down the front of his belly. And so now that's drying a little bit more. I'll get a bit more of my grey, burnt umber, cobalt blue. I made a slightly stronger grey now, so it's less water, more pigment, so it's not going to flow as much. And I'm going to darken up the really darkest dark areas, just giving the effect of feathers. I'm not fussing with each individual little line. You don't need to do that. You can just suggest, just leave little marks that make your eye think, tricks your eye into seeing feathers. Like that. There's a few more coming down here on his belly. So pop those in, like that. I'm just going to darken up the underneath of this feather. And I'm going to pop a little bit more featherage, this darker, stronger tone along here, like that. And I'm happy with that. That's pretty good. So now I'm going to go back with this thicker texture around the outer edge of his iris. And I'm going to start to now do his eyes, because they're going to be so much fun, and it's much, much darker around his eyes. Much, much darker. So pop those darker lines on. And then I'm also going to do his beak now, using this same grey. I'll leave little sort of jaggedy bits there so it suggests the feathers, like that. And pop his little beak on, like that. And I'll add darker tones to that to make it look a bit more three-dimensional, less flat. Grab some more of that grey and drop in the pupils. Just being careful not to get too much water on there. I'll just pick a little bit of that up with my brush. Go on to the other eye, like that, and fill in that pupil. Trying to stay in my lines and keep it round. Okay, there we go. Right, and I can now start to, oh actually I've got to do his little claws on his feet, his talons. Do his little talons, like that. Anywhere that's the darkest dark. So I can even go over this again. I'm going to go over it with a little bit more transparent sienna, just to strengthen up the reddy tones, the reddy brown around his eye. So being careful to keep it, that eye actually goes right up to the top. I'm just going to strengthen up these reddish brown areas around his eyes. And I'm going to leave little snips of the underlying colour you can see, just to create a bit more texture. I don't want it to look solid because he's a soft and fluffy bird. Again, to take that around the bottom of his eye. I can add a bit more of that red brown around the top, like that. Leave it onto his bearded area. Add a little smidge more. You can start to add little highlights and back onto the top, because I'm going in with thicker pigment. And just to add a little bit more texture, make him a little bit more interesting, and give him a little bit of life. I'm going to come down onto his tummy now. That's still a little bit damp, which is fine. And I'm going to take this down to his legs now and strengthen up the tone on his legs, on the back of his legs especially, like that. And that other leg is there. I'm going to get my brush, dampen it, clean it, take the moisture out of it. I'm just going to soften, just brush that down to soften the front of that leg. Righto, you can see I've made a little bit of a mess of that eye. It's not quite perfectly round. So I'm going to clean my brush, wet it, take the excess moisture out of it, and try and just go around the edges that I've done there and try and make it a little bit rounder. I might have to enlarge this eye a fraction as well, this pupil, sorry. Just a fraction to keep it the same. Get a bit more on my brush. I need to get a bit more moisture on my brush. It's not quite damp enough. I'm just going to take that eye down a fraction just to match the eye on the left. Whoops. Clean my brush again, get that little jaggedy bit that I got there. Right, I'm happy with that. So now, well, I'm going to let that dry for a little bit, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to wet the stump. So I'm just going to do the stump in, and it's very, very simple. I'm going to use yellow ochre and burnt sienna. So I've wet the paper where the stump is. I'm going to go straight into my yellow ochre, get that on my palette, like that. And I'm going to drop that in and let it flow, like that. Let it flow, and that will help to create the grains of the wood. Come under that little talon there, like that. Now, while that's still very wet, go into my transparent sienna. Oh, sorry, burnt sienna. I think I'll go burnt sienna. Where's my burnt sienna? Go burnt sienna, there it is. Which is another reddy brown, slightly darker. And pop that in and let that flow down to help create that texture. You can see that's quite thick paint I've put there. So pop that there like that, take that down to the page, leave little gaps, make it interesting. Right, like that. And I'm going to leave that alone. I'll add the shadows right at the end. So now I'm going to go back onto his featherage under his chin. I'm going to add a little bit more of this transparent sienna. Whoops, got too much water on there, but that's okay. I'll just pick it up, clean my brush, take the excess moisture off it, pick that up like that, and I can just drag that excess paint around like that. And I've got to add some darker brown, so I'm going to go back into the grey, or what's left of my grey. Actually, I might have to make a little bit more, so I go burnt umber, cobalt blue, burnt umber, cobalt blue, like that. I just need to add some darker feathers around his back of his neck like that, and around the bottom of this transparent sienna here like that, and again around the bottoms of these feathers here. I'm going to add some blue onto his chest just to help soften those feathers. I'm going to go back onto his irises, his pupils, sorry, gently, carefully, with this stronger tone of grey. So it's just a stronger mixture of the blue and brown to make a stronger grey, a darker grey, like that. Be very careful not to smudge it. And now I'm also going to take that grey, that same darker grey, onto the bottom of his beak where it's the darkest, and start to create more of a three-dimensional look. I might even add a little bit of Payne's grey. So I've got a Payne's grey over here on my other palette, so I'll grab a little bit of Payne's grey on there. And I'm going to plop that into the brown and blue mixture of grey that I've got there. Now I'm also going to take that onto his beak to darken up to the point of his beak, make it really strong dark, and also up the edges at the top of his beak like that. There we go. And I might even, now that I'm looking at it, take a bit of that Payne's grey around the edge of his iris. And then we're going to go back in to the eyes when that dries and add the beautiful gold tone that he has around his irises. Just going to add a little bit of that darker tone, that Payne's grey, onto the top of his ear feathers as well. Around there, like that. Fluff that up a bit. Fluff that around the edges of his eyes. Right. Okay, I'm going to let that dry a little bit, and I'm going to go back onto his toes, and I'm going to add a little bit more, a little bit actually of this gold again, what's it called? It is transparent sienna, sorry. Take that onto his toes because it's dried back incredibly pale. Just going to add that on there like that, and I'm going to add a few more feathery textures onto the back of this leg using the burnt sienna, off the same as what I've got on the stump, just to help define that. And I'll add a shadow behind that leg actually. Towards the end I will add a shadow because he needs a shadow down there. Grab a bit more pure transparent sienna there. I'll take that back onto that other leg as well. Wet my brush a little bit more. Put a little bit of a shadow there coming down the main part of his leg, just so it doesn't look so sort of sharp, hard. I don't want sharp, hard lines. He's a soft, fluffy bird. Okay. Right, so now that's almost dry enough. I've just got to wait for the eyes to dry. So I'm going to add now, I'm going to go in with very diluted blue and add some feathery lines down here onto his chest. You can see the feathery lines there. And I might have to add a little bit, I've got to get a little bit maybe of gouache to put up here because I've lost a little bit of the white feathers under his eyes, sort of on his cheeks. Right, so I might even do that now. I'll grab a bit of my gouache because I've got to wait for the pupils to dry. So I'll grab a little bit of white gouache that I've always got handy, And I'm gonna just have to wet that. So I'll spray, give it a spray like that. And then grab my brush, come around onto the areas that I've lost where I need the white, and just drop a bit of that white gouache, and that'll lighten that up for me. Just like that. I might even add a little bit up there, just a little snip. Right, that's got that back for me. And I'm going to leave that alone now. That's all that needed, was to just take those little feathery bits out to the sides of his eyes. I might grab a little bit thicker though, because there we go. It's a little bit thicker there. I'll just pick up the bottom of that. Okay, now his eyes are dry enough almost. And I'm going to go in with cadmium yellow to begin with, which is a beautiful bright yellow. I'll start on this left eye, and I'm just going to drop in that cadmium yellow all around that eye, like that, taking it right to the edges. Same on the other eye, cadmium yellow, because the edges of the iris is dried now. So I take that right round, drop it in, drag it round, fill that eye. Oops. That's all right, I can just clean my brush, pick that up before it runs away. Clean my brush, wasn't quite dry enough. That's right, clean my brush and just go back in and keep picking it up with a dry brush until you've got it almost back to where you want it. And I'll leave that edge, and I'll go to the other side, closer to the outside of the eye, back in with that yellow, and take it around this edge, this outer edge. I can go back over that little bit that I've sort of smudged in a minute. I'm just going to go back and clean my brush and pick up this gouache puddle that I've got, a little bit of a gouache puddle. There we go. And now I'm going to go back into the top of those eyes with a stronger orange. I'm going to use a red orange, because his eye's not all just one colour. There's shadow, there's all kinds of stuff going on. So I'm going to drop in, following the shape of his eye, and I'm going to get my brush and just spread that around a little bit. Spread that around. Doesn't matter that see the yellow's crawled up into the black now. That's fine, because I can just go over the black again of the centre of his eye. I can go over that again. I'm just going to let the orange sort of flow round like that, because it's not all just one colour. And I might even add a little bit of a stronger orange, a reddier orange as well, into the very top. Just a tiny little bit like that. Okay, now while that's drying, I will tidy up that pupil in a minute. While that's drying, I'm going to go back onto my stump down here. You can see I've got some puddles gathering at the bottom, so I'll just pick those up, clean my brush, take the moisture out, pick those puddles up. And I'm going to go in with my grey, burnt umber cobalt blue grey. So get a bit more cobalt blue, a bit more burnt umber, and mix that on there. And I'm going to use that into the stump down here, add a bit more texture, a few more browns. Take it right under that claw, because that's in shadow, like that. Come around here, bajaggedy that up a bit. Because it's a tree stump, you want it to look a little bit rough. All right. Take it right up to the bottom of his toe, the darkest dark, like that. And we're going to leave the stump alone. I'm not going to do any more to that stump at all. And now I'm going to go back onto the pupil with the Payne's Grey, and I'm just going to touch in that Payne's Grey to where I had the little smudgy bit, like that. Being very careful to keep it in the pupil. Same on the other eye. Still travelling a little bit. I'm going to tidy that up. Right. Okie doke. So I'm quite happy with that. Now I'm going to let that dry. Oops, I'm going to do a little bit more on this side. I'm going to let it dry. So for the light highlight on his eye, I'm actually going to use a white Posca pen. So I'm going to grab my white Posca pen because I can get a perfect dot onto that side, the highlight on the sides of his pupils, just like that. And I'll put a little highlight on the tip of his beak. And there we have it. I am going to call that done. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I've had so much fun showing you how to draw and paint this lovely owl and how simple it can be. I hope you enjoyed it. Yep, so I'd love it if you click like and subscribe, click on the bell icon. That way you'll be notified when I release a new video, and I will see you all next time. Have a great day. Okie doke. Bye.